My guest this evening is none other than the co-founder of Metaforce and the co-author of the book Shift Ahead, How the Best Companies Stay Relevant in a Fast-Changing World, Alan Adamson. Alan, thank you again for joining me here on Mind Your Business.
Delight to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Why do many companies, just ignore the warning signs and they struggle at seeing what's around the corner? Basically, my question is, why do they fail at shifting ahead?
Yeah, as I said earlier, there's not just one, if you just watch this, you'll shift ahead.
Right.
Yeah, one of the biggest ones is they start too late. Change happens. Every change goes through what's called an S curve. That starts off small and people don't pay attention to it, and then takes off. And by the time many companies react to it, they start too late, and then they don't execute brilliantly. We'll go to some old stories. Barnes & Noble is still in business.
Right.
They've been struggling. When I spoke to the folks at Barnes & Noble, they saw Amazon when it started. They viewed it again as who's going to buy books online? They could have bought it. They could have put it out of business, but they let it go, and they paid no attention to that person behind the curtain. By the time they said, "Oh my goodness, it's really," then they tried to go online. They're online now, but they built a website, but they didn't do it well. They didn't do it as well as Amazon. Then they waited again too long, and they said, "Gee, people aren't reading books anymore. They're reading on their tablets. So let's do that." And they came out with the Nook. Again, too late and not brilliantly executed. So part of the biggest challenge is by the time your competitor or somebody's disrupting you, it's too late. The other big challenge companies have is that they play too much tennis and not enough golf. Let me tell you what I mean by that.
Yeah, sure.
When I play both badly, some days worse than others, but when I'm playing tennis, my main objective is to hit the ball where the opponent is not. And many, many companies, when I was at Unilever, we spent forever worrying about what Procter's doing or what Colgate's doing. We were just watching the competition. We were just laser focused on that. When I was working with Pepsi, all the conversations were about Coke. Yet, when you play golf, and if you play it well, or certainly better than I do, you have to worry about, you have to pay attention to who you're playing with, but your main focus needs to be on the ball. What's going on? What's the wind? What's the terrain like? You're paying more attention to the customer. And if you look at most companies, they're watching their competition, but they're not zooming out and seeing what's happening around them. And if you think of how they get disrupted, P&G Gillette didn't get disrupted from Schick. It got disrupted from outside the category, from Harry's. Pepsi is not getting their lunch eaten by Coke. It's happening by small niche brands on the outside. So change happens outside, and so this myopic focus on just looking at your competitors instead of looking out and saying, what's going on in my customers' lives? What's going on around me? Because you're most likely to get shifted ahead. You're shifted in front of by somebody coming from behind you or from the side, not from the person that's most like you.
Now, are there any companies that come to mind that were they got a late head start, but they were able to get back on the horse in time, and then and then got back on their game and regained their position as leader in the industry? Or it's hard to think of those.
There were a few of those that did it. I'll give you one that almost went away. It was again owned the category, and they had to go through a little pain to get there. I had the privilege early in my career of working with National Geographic, and when I was growing up, National Geographic was a magazine every household got, and in the basement the yellow books were piled up. And they owned that whole space. If you were interested in nature, geography, lions, tigers, bears, they owned it. And over time, they were in Washington. I spoke to, they hired a CMO who came in, and they brought a really powerful person in from Disney. But she wasn't able to use the brand word. They said, no, we're an institution. We know what we're doing. So they just kept at it. And they were somewhat lucky because lots of people like me subscribed, and so they weren't dependent on the ad model. But down the street, a new competitor popped up who just did television called Discovery, and almost cleaned their clock. And they zoomed out and said, "Gee, we're not totally a magazine company. they did a joint venture with something called Lindblad Cruises. So now that if you go on a cruise to Alaska and you take pictures, you're on a boat with a National Geographic boats. You're on there with a National Geographic photographer who takes the lens cap off when the whale comes up, so you don't miss the picture. Right. If you go on the shore, you get to experience a National Geographic naturalist explain things. And so, of course, when you get on social media, your social feed is full of here's my National Geographic picture,
right.
here's my National
right.
Geographic, and all of a sudden the brand has become experiential
right.
and gotten reborn.
The experience.
And they even gone back and went and said, what we own content. This year they released Jane Goodall's movie, and they just didn't print. Normally, they would have just printed another story on Jane Goodall, who saved all the lions in Africa. But now they released a full movie on it, and so they're realizing that they have this ownership, and they don't have to deliver it all through a nice
printed,
yellow bound magazine.
So that's a great example.
They've made it, but they almost didn't. And again, another example of the more successful the organization and the brand, the more likely it is to get left behind because it's going great. We're on back to cruise control, autopilot, all those things happen. But they're an example of a brand that was inches away from becoming a footnote, Blockbuster, or something else, and they figured out how to save it.
Now, what factors limit the success in shifting a company ahead? Are there any particular factors?
I would say one of them is the empty gas tank. By the time they decide it's time to go left, there are no more gas in the tank, and
So
they
you
can't.
mean in terms of team, is that talent? Or
It's a combination
money?
of investment money, talent. That's a key thing is that they don't have the resources anymore because their business has been going south so long. By the time they decide they have to, dance a different way, there's no more money or talent or both. Another one is not recognizing their core, what we called their DNA, their strength. We had a great conversation with the CEO of Hasbro, and he told the story about how he turned Hasbro around. And Hasbro been in business a long time, made great games from Monopoly to Sorry, everything everyone grew up with. But you don't have to be a marketing genius to know that kids aren't spending a lot of time on
board games.
On board games. So they brought Brian in. He was part of a tiny division that they had in Los Angeles and Hollywood. And when they brought the Hollywood guy to run the toy company, the folks at headquarters went crazy. What does he know about board games and toys? And we've had people from the toy business running this business forever. But he brought in a little DNA of Hollywood and some of the team who looked at entertainment and how that DNA and that culture and that skill set could be merged with the toy mindset. And to date, Hasbro has transformed itself. They are successful. And other toy companies that have stayed focused on the toy category, Mattel and others, are still struggling. So part of it is recognize what you're good at and stay true to that, because many, many companies got into other businesses. Xerox tried to get into consulting, but they were better at selling things than running a consulting business, so they recently sold it. Radio Shack tried to reinvent themselves, and they said, "Well, we're gonna provide answers. If you got questions, we're going to be back then they wanted to be the Genius Bar of technology. That's right. Unfortunately, they were not. By the time they tried to do it, when you went into a store and you asked somebody, can you help me do this? The person behind the counter had less qualification to solve the problem than you. So they had the right idea, but they didn't have the DNA, the talent, and by the time they tried to do it, they couldn't shift their business ahead.
Wow, scary stuff. For anyone in the business world.
As I said earlier, there are more ways to end up as your father's Oldsmobile than there are ways to reinvent it, and lots of watch outs.
I mean, you're sharing such vital information. I'm afraid to say great information because it's like scary stuff on one hand, but it's it's like if I'll put it in these terms. If someone's going to an affair, they're going to a wedding, and they know they have a stain on their suit, a good friend will come over and say, hey, buddy, Jimmy, let's just put a little seltzer on and let's get the stain out and you'll be fine. And everyone else just stares and knows that this is just not going to end well, but the person goes in, and that's. That would be the example I would give to transfer it over to the business world, that you're discussing real situations about something that really every business has to have their eyes and ears open and realize that there are threats, there are challenges up ahead, and you just can't be the ostrich with the head in the sand.
You always need fresh eyes, and that's the people that can sort of look at what is and say, actually, back to an old Jerry Seinfeld line, you ever wonder why people do that? And because people get accustomed to just accepting things and nothing. Yeah. And until somebody, often younger people, say, I was renting a car, taking my son to college a couple years ago at the airport, and my son looked at me like I was from Mars. Dad, why are you renting a car? 2 clicks on my phone. I don't want to get on the bus to the car and so part of it is I'd always gone to the airport and rented a car. That was sort of I was on autopilot, cruise control, and we did speak to the folks at Hertz, and in fact they are still they're playing a lot of tennis. They're worried about Avis and National. They're not zooming out. They're now sort of thinking about Uber, but the next change coming driverless as well as car sharing. So, what happens when you can rent your neighbor's car for half the price instead of, renting, Hertz's car? So, part of it is just having somebody in your ear say, what are you thinking? What do you mean rent a car? What do you mean, drink a carbonated sugar drink? And part of it is we're creatures of habit, but part of it is keeping fresh eyes.
So important. So what would you say, your advice for an organization that in order to make sure that they are ready to shift ahead?
One is to look beyond your nose, look ahead. Part of what we talked about earlier is to be successful. You can't wait till it's too late.
Right.
So you got to get beyond what's going to happen tomorrow, right. And you got to look down the road. And ideally, you got to look around the corner, and that's not easy. So the first rule is oftentimes companies have a strategic or future planning meeting. And companies that have the future as an agenda item really get into trouble. Because, we're going to talk about tomorrow on Thursday at 4 o'clock. And of course, Thursday at 4 o'clock comes and something else comes out. We'll worry about tomorrow next week. And so the first is to realize that it's everyone's job to look around, look ahead, to get your nose out of the book, if you would, get your nose off the screen. The answer will not come from reading 400 emails, usually. The answer will come, we talked about the Bill Marriott story earlier, and one of the other quotes about Bill Marriott was that they used to say his feet never touched a desk because he would spend all of his time in the hotels, talking to the front door people, fluffing the pillows, tasting the food. And, when we talk about what an organization needs to get ready to shift, one of the things leadership needs to get out from the wood-paneled or top floor with a nice view and get out and, smell the roses and get back in touch with the customer. Yes, you can read the research, you can delegate research to someone else, but if the leadership is not in touch with what's happening in the company, you're going to be doing what some other rental car companies doing, asking, well, did you like the car today? Was it clean? Was it available on time? But not asking the bigger question, well, if you didn't have a car rented at the airport, how else would you get there? Right. What else is going on in your life? And so part of getting ready is getting out of the bubble and trying to look down the road beyond what's going to happen Monday.
Right. It's very interesting. We had on the show Steven Shapiro. And Steven Shapiro is this innovation instigator, and he talked about how it's very important for an executive to, from time to time, meet up with people in a different industry, but there is some conversions.
Innovation often happens from looking next door to you,
yes.
not right in front of you again. And
that's
so,
correct.
Part of it is to get out of your bubble. And lots of the examples of organizations that were not able to shift ahead was that they, to find what's coming next, you have to go to the fringes, if you would. So if you're only looking down 48th Street, there's a lot happening on 48th Street, but candidly getting to the fringe and understanding change because it's happening faster. Before you could have said, "Oh, I see that change happening." We have 10 years for that. You don't have 10 years for anything. The other big dynamic that makes this harder is that the pace of change is accelerating. Well, everyone talks about it, faster and faster. The facts are in many industries, it is dramatically faster. The number of generations growing up doing what their parents did is non-existent.
So one piece of advice is to consult with others, or even such as
Get
yourself,
out of your bubble.
and get out of your bubble. Do you have advice? What would be your recommendation for CEOs, C-level executives, for them to set aside time to read? I'll just give it as an example. We know that I believe Warren Buffett, it was said that he used to read for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
Just to personal development. Yeah. What's your take on that?
Yeah, the same sort of thing. Talk to somebody that you wouldn't ordinarily talk to. Go visit some country. And the best marketing advice, as you know, is observational. Yeah. If you ask somebody, why do you wear a blue shirt, they'll tell you because it was on sale. They'll give you 100 reasons. But if you watch what they do and why they pick the blue shirt, so the best advice is to open your eyes and look at what goes on and ask why. Not just say, all right, and don't take the first answer. I buy it because it costs less, or I'm buying it because it's easier. Yeah. Again, all these tips are, pretty clear. The trick is like
implementation.
Yeah, the trick is doing it. I know that I shouldn't eat 14 Twinkies a day if I want to lose weight. the trick is, not eating 14 Twinkies.
I love the honor of interviewing C-level executives and sharing their great advice and perspective on Mind Your Business. I'd love to get your feedback. Post it in the comments below and subscribe. You'll never miss an edition of Mind Your Business.